So today's guest Tom and I met a couple weeks ago, and it's a pretty fascinating story that we're going to talk about. He and I met, and we'll go into depth a little bit about this. But he and I met at a local authors event. And when I say local, I roughly mean Blair County surrounding areas where I grew up. And I was there, promoting my books. He was there promoting his book. And it just so happened I didn't even see the book. I just saw him, and I thought, oh, looks like a nice guy. I'll go sit and talk to that guy. And it was an awesome conversation. Not only your daughter, not only the book, but also your life story. So intermingled in this conversation, I think is going to be a little bit about all of those things. But formally, Tom, welcome to the show. I'm glad we can make this happen.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here, and I really enjoyed our conversation we had, and I enjoy talking to positive people like yourself. So I'm glad to be on and to be able to share some more awareness of what my daughter went through and how it's changed the world.
Yeah. And those are not like that's not an exaggeration. And you listeners are going to hear how and why he can say those words, and really mean those words. Let's go back to what you said about me. You said a positive person. It's funny, man, because there's the exterior, there's the me that you met at the event, there's the people you see on social media. And I think if you would ask my wife, do you consider Charlie a positive person? I mean, she would probably say, yeah, yeah. But it wouldn't be like, yeah, like, because it takes a lot of
Yes.
work, man. It takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of valleys. But talk about you guys. Talk about your family. Whether it's a positive attitude, whether it's spirit, whether it's just committing to not quitting. Like you guys have been through a lot. So I guess first and foremost, maybe intro Emily's story, and then just talk a little bit about the realities of your emotions during that time.
Yeah, so my daughter Emily was born on May 2nd of 2005, and she weighed 10 pounds, big baby, and was perfectly healthy. And she stayed that way until just after her fifth birthday. We were going in Memorial Day weekend of 2010. And on a Thursday, Emily was healthy, but having a few problems. We noticed she had a lot of bruising on her body. And that week, we noticed blood on her gums when she was brushing her teeth. And a couple times I saw some dried blood on her nose. But didn't think too much about it until overnight she had severe knee pains. And by the next day, we were, by afternoon on Friday, May 28th of 2010, we were at the Penn State Hershey Children's Hospital being told Emily had leukemia. And she is now on a morphine pump to handle the pain. So completely, I knew our lives would never be the same after that day. But, right off the bat, the first time my wife called me and said, it's cancer. We were in the local ER at the Clearfield Hospital here. And I said to her, don't let Emily see fear in us. So when I went and picked her up at the emergency room, I said, we're going to have a tough fight on our hands here. You have cancer, and only the strongest children in the world are picked to fight cancer. So you're going to be a hero, and you're going to beat it no matter what. And I said, we're going to look at the positive side of this because we're going to get to spend a lot more time together. So we, put her in the car and took her down the hospital. But it was very devastating. And I learned pretty quick, too, how your perspective can change. Because the first day walking into the cancer ward there at Hershey, I remember being devastated, thinking this is my only child and we shouldn't be here. How is this happening to us type thing? And then, 2 weeks into her treatment, so I will say when we got started, they told us this is the garden variety kind of cancer. It's the most curable kind of pediatric cancer. If you have to have a child with cancer, this is the one you want to have. So they told us 85 to 90% chance that she'd be fine when we were done, as long as we did 26 months of chemotherapy. So we got started with that positive attitude that, hey, we can do this. A lot of families get a diagnosis that they can't, that doesn't have a great outlook. But then just a couple of outpatient chemotherapies, and now we're up to June 11th of 2010. And we're taken in a room by the chief of surgery at Hershey on a Friday afternoon. And he said, cancer's not your problem today. You need to save your daughter's life. I might have to amputate both of her legs.
Wow.
So, we went online, and I said to my wife, I feel strongly we need people to pray for Emily. And if they don't pray, send their positive thoughts. because I felt that could help. But went into that surgery. They were able to save both of her legs. She ended up with very painful wound vacs in the intensive care unit. And then about a week to 10 days later, we were celebrating getting back to the cancer ward with her still in one piece. So like I said, I really learned quickly that your perspective can change. And when you think things can't get worse, they can.
What was the cause of the near amputation?
So she developed necrotic fasciitis in the muscle in her left thigh and her right calf, because when they gave her the chemotherapy, it knocked her immune system down. And then they don't know what caused it because they said it's very rare. But we learned that we would hear that quite often through Emily's treatment, that this almost never happens, but, so we got through that. We got through, she ended up spending that first month in the hospital, but at the end of that first month, what they call induction, she was in remission. So then we were very hopeful that she still had both her legs. She got past those infections and now she's in remission. So hopefully, we would stay on track then and be done within 26 months, as long as we followed everything they told us to do, which we did. But that isn't how it went for my Emily.
Yeah, to real quick to second something you said about the perspectives. We probably talked about it a little bit, but my brother is going through cancer. He has a brain tumor, and my mom has an autoimmune disease. And one of the things, I don't think he used the word perspective, but what you're talking about is perspective, and it's like that next thing and that next thing, and you never know when it's going to be. Like your crappy day today could be the brightest day of next week. Like you just never know. And one of the things with my brother that I realize is, and he's actually getting a third surgery here today, tomorrow, the next day, and like we just live on 2 month increments. So as listener, you're thinking like, oh, what am I gonna do with the rest of my life? Blah blah blah. It's like that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's 2 month increments. It's 6 week increments. It's much more condensed, and your paradigm for life just changes. And you guys obviously were hit with that out of nowhere.
Yeah, and we got down to sometimes just saying, hey, we have to get through today, so you're here to fight tomorrow. So it come down to day, sometimes hour to hour. After she did get in remission, we felt pretty good, but we still would hear that every once in a while that Emily didn't quite react to the medicines the way they usually think they would. They'd say, oh, this medicine can knock her down for 3 days. They'd give it to her, and 4 hours later, we're playing air hockey down at the playroom. But, again, we were thankful she got in remission. We never missed an appointment from the time she had her leg infections. All three of us stuck together. My wife and I decided we would never separate again. That was the first time we had separated for an appointment, saying, let's try to keep our jobs. So we'll take turns taking her to appointments. And after that, we never did that again. But, she stayed in remission then for 16 months. And then everything changed again when we went to locally here at the Mount Nittany Medical Center in State College with Dr. Jim Powell. He was her local pediatric oncologist. He checked her blood one day, and he called the next day and said, this almost never happens when chemotherapy works for these kids and they're still in treatment. Unfortunately, Emily's relapsed, and now everything's changed again. So that was around October of 2011.
So that's a year.
Yeah, 16 months out. Yeah.
So real quick before we take off from that point, move forward. One of the things, and this doesn't, I haven't fully thought this through, but I just remember, I read a book years ago called Man's Search for Meaning. And it's about a guy, Viktor Frankl, who was in the Holocaust, and he writes about the story, and he writes about finding meaning and the kind of desire to see his wife, and writing a book, and these different things that turn this place of hell into a meaningful existence for him. And so I think of these situations in my life, in your life, in someone else's life. And one of the things that I've grown to not like, or not, I don't say, and I don't like when I think it, is someone always has it worse than you. Someone always has it worse to you. It's almost like that puts the power of your sanity and whatever on someone else. Well, okay, well, what if one day they don't have it worse than me? Then what do I say? Like, how do I make sense of my own shit, basically? So what I'm asking you is not whether you agree with that or don't agree with that, but how are you guys like not just quitting life really, or losing? Because I met you and your wife, and on the outset you seem like, nice people, happy couple, raising a very kind daughter. Like, not that you've made it through, because who knows, but you're here and you could be somewhere very different. So how did you guys like keep it in perspective of like, this is like the worst thing ever potentially to lose your child? How did you guys like mentally work yourselves through it?
We had a nurse right off the bat, Nurse Kari, who I talk about in our book. She came in the first couple of days and said, listen, you two are going to remember to date throughout this period, because too many families are getting divorced when their children are fighting cancer. And that leads to the child missing treatment, and then that leads to a worse outcome. So I want you to remember to concentrate on your marriage through this. And we're still very close with her. But we just decided from the beginning that we'll talk about things. And my wife is the science part of it, and I was put in charge of hope. So she works in research at Penn State. So she had the knowledge of how to look up everything that was going into Emily, what open trials there were, especially after Emily relapsed. But it was just a decision we made. And that kind of did help me. That thought process for me was, I can look around here and tonight Emily's sleeping and I can hear a child suffering in the next room who passed away in the morning. So when you think you have it bad, or one morning I come through the door, I'd gotten Starbucks, I'm bringing some hot coffees in, and I hear a code going off. And the nurses are frantic, and I'm running down the hallway hoping it's not our room. And I get to our room and things are okay. And I look across and there's an infant that they're doing CPR on, fighting cancer across the hallway from us. So I just, I kept that in my mind that almost every day you can find somebody that has it worse than you, and you got to stick together to build each other up. But we did get to a point finally when people were telling us we've never seen a child this sick that survived. So, now we're 16 months in, and we've been told Emily's relapsed and this almost never happens. And one of the best things we decided to do was fill out an online second opinion form at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, because now things aren't going the way they explained it. As soon as they told us she relapsed, they said bone marrow transplant is the way to go. And now she has a less than 1 in 3 chance of survival. So we had to find a donor that was unrelated, because Emily's an only child. And so we went to Philadelphia for the first time, and they looked at Emily and said, hey, if you're comfortable at Hershey, because that's only 2 hours from home, go ahead and stay there. And if you ever need us, we'll be here, because we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to identify a donor, put her into a bone marrow transplant, and that's her best hope. So we were comfortable there in Hershey and knew the nurses, knew the staff. I think at the time there was like 28 oncology nurses at Penn State Children's, and there was 125, I think, at CHOP. Mm-hmm. So we liked the fact that we knew them already. But we always included Emily in the decision, and she said she wanted to stay there. So we tried to do that, and the goal was to get to bone marrow transplant the first week of February of 12. And they were preparing Emily for the full body radiation, which can affect her, thought process and learning ability, and cause secondary cancers, and measuring her for all that. And then one day they come in and said, unfortunately, your donor isn't available till the end of February, so we have to put Emily on hold. And, we ended up never meeting the donor, but in that time period during the delay, Emily relapsed again and then no longer qualified for a bone marrow transplant. So we had been down, one more time in between to CHOP or ask for another second opinion. So now we're out of options, and Hershey said it's time to give Emily one more dose of chemotherapy and take her home and enjoy the days you have left with her. And that hit pretty hard. So I paged our doctors at CHOP one more time and said, we're not ready to go home on hospice. Do you have anything? Because we want to transfer down there and give you her full care. And Dr. Susan Reingold, who is one of their relapse specialists, said, I find it amazing that you paged me today, because this new CAR T-cell therapy that's never been tried on a child before, we just got permission yesterday. It was the last email I read. So we think Emily is the perfect patient to try this on, and you can transfer down. So we went down there on March 1st of 2012 and entered her into this trial. And they extracted the T cells out of her blood, which are part of your white blood cells, took them off to the lab and genetically modified them to recognize and then kill her cancer. So when they extracted her T cells out, they gave her the harshest round of chemotherapy she had ever been given. It's called clofarabine. And they had told us that the dose we have to give her to slow her cancer down would take the life of an adult. So they gave her that chemotherapy, and they said if you don't give it to her, she won't be here to get the treatment because it takes 6 weeks to grow her cells. So we didn't have much of a choice, but she handled that medicine okay. And over the 6 weeks, she didn't get any infection or, any kind of harmful thing that could stop her from getting the treatment. So she stayed in isolation in her hospital room for that 6 weeks. And then they finally gave her modified T cells back on April 17th, 18th, and 19th of 2012. And then by far, she became the sickest of her entire treatment. They found out later that these new genetically modified T cells, each one of them can kill 1,000 tumor cells once it went back in there. So this army went in there of her own cells trained to beat her cancer, started killing all that cancer, and over 3.5 pounds of her body weight was cancer in her blood. So it overwhelmed her system, and she ended up in a coma on a ventilator for 14 days. And, they came to me at one point and said, children just can't survive being this sick. Her lungs have failed, her kidneys are failing. She's on the ventilator. Call your family in because she's not going to be here in the morning. And I said, well, I think she's going to beat her cancer and change the world. So please keep trying to help her. And that's when the doctor hauled me out in the hallway and he said, there's less than a 1 in 1,000 chance your daughter's alive when the sun comes up. I don't think you understand what I'm telling you. And I said, well, I happen to know she's going to beat her cancer, so I'll see you at rounds tomorrow. And he kind of looked at me like I was the most naive parent in the world.
I want to ask that.
She was still there fighting that morning.
That's what I want to ask, because there's like a fine line between like belief, conviction, and then the other side of that, which is just like a failure to believe reality or failure to live in reality, and it's like
failure to comprehend.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, that's like, that's a serious problem, right? And it's almost like someone just pretending that everything's happy and good when they're not. But here you are in a situation, I don't even have anything to compare it to, but I mean, it's your daughter, right? So you're going to fight harder for that and believe harder for that than anything on earth. And in your mind, it was just straight conviction. It was straight, like the doctor's like, no, seriously, guy, this is the deal. And you're like, no, okay, that's fine. I'll be back in the morning. He's like, no, like, was it just, where was that coming from in you?
Well, I told you a little bit about it, but I had I call it a whisper, but people say they have a sign, but I got that at Hershey several weeks before. Whenever I could see her getting better in the bone marrow transplant hallway there at CHOP in Philly, and we were teaching her to walk again, and she had beat cancer. It happened 2 nights in a row, and after the second night, I said to my wife, this is hard for me to tell you about because I know you're all about science, but I know the outcome of what's going to happen coming up here. And she said, she didn't have a good reaction.
Exactly what anyone would think.
Yeah. And I said, I don't
You've
know.
lost your mind.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and we were actually on our way back to Hershey. We had just turned down another trial at CHOP on our second trip down. And I'm driving back and she started crying and said, the science shows she can't survive. And we're going back to Hershey to watch her die because we're comfortable there. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And she said, how are you calm? And I said, I know these 3 things. She's going to beat cancer. We're going to have to teach her to walk again. And we're going to end up in that bone marrow transplant hallway at CHOP where they showed us the hallway our first time down there in case we picked them to get it. And I said, somehow in my whole being, I know that's going to happen. And she said, you turn this car around right now. If you truly think that's going to happen, why wouldn't you tell me that before? I said, I don't want you to tell anybody what I just told you, and it's not time yet. And then when they finally came and said back at Hershey 3 weeks later that this is it, it's time to take her home, I said that it's time to take her down there now. And when I paged them, they said it had opened the day before, because they had told us on our second trip down about this CAR T cell therapy. It said, unfortunately, Emily won't live long enough to try it because we're several months from getting permission.
Yeah.
They were waiting for the FDA and their internal review board to say, go ahead and try it. And then it just happened the day before I texted them or paged them. They got the word it's okay to try this now. So I felt it was meant to be. And then when they treated her and said she's not going to make it, I said, this is really hard for me to tell you, because I didn't want people to label me crazy or anything. But I said, I know the outcome of this, so please keep trying to help her. And they thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
So
this like I'm trying to work my way through the ups and the downs and the near deaths and the total defeat. So whenever she went to CHOP, which is Children's Hospital Philadelphia, so to get the CAR T treatment, there was they started it, they had to send it away for 6 weeks, and then it had to come back.
Yeah, it was just across the street at the Penn lab where they train it. And that's where got a lot of media attention afterward, because HIV is actually used on those cells just in the lab with the virus removed.
Yeah.
It has the ability to break into T cells, and then they tag a protein on it and use it like a car, and it drives into your T cells and dies and leaves that protein. And then your T cells remember to fight that protein, and that protein is expressed on Emily's cancer.
Okay.
So we told her they were sending her cells off to boot camp to turn them into an army that was going to come in and attack her cancer.
Yeah. And then in that 6 weeks, she had the bone marrow transplant?
No, nope. She didn't qualify for it. So they just gave her that.
She got too sick too sick for this.
She got that chemotherapy that wiped out her immune system. Just like if you're going to bone marrow transplant and they wipe out everything and start over. So they killed all her cancer at that time. Well, most of it. It got it down to around 10%, but it also took her entire immune system out, so she couldn't fight anything. And they said, if you bring the common cold back to her room from the cafeteria, it will take her life.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out. That's within the 6 week time span.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So it's not even.
They're growing the cells, and we just had to keep Emily away from germs, locked up in her hospital room.
Okay, so that's what I was getting at. Even when you qualify, it's not like here, qualify, get here, then they do the injection or therapy or whatever. It's she's here, okay, now we got to do this thing, and then we got to give her chemo, and then she might die within those 6 weeks, but hopefully not. So it's just like a constant uncertainty.
Yeah, when they first extracted her T cells, they said, we have to, before we train them, we have to see if they'll grow. We have a specific way here that we grow them, and if they won't grow, then you're done. So we didn't sleep a couple nights wondering if they would grow. Then they come back and said, hey, her T cells actually grow really well. So then they took them off and trained them and come in and said they're ready. Then she got them. And then they said, unfortunately, the side effects, it's called a cytokine release storm, is going to probably take her life. And she made it through that. And I had not told the doctors anything about my whisper of how things would end up. I only told my wife and said, please don't tell anybody else. But that night they said 1 in 1,000 chance she'll survive. She was still there at rounds the next day. And within an hour of the doctor saying it's hard to medically explain how she's still fighting, but she absolutely can't make it through another day unless something changes. And they come through the door and said, Dr. June, who's in charge of the research at Penn, had researched this arthritis medicine for his daughter, because she has rheumatoid arthritis. It's never been used on a cancer patient before. But what's going wrong in Emily's system is the interleukin-6 protein is 1,000 times higher in her system than anybody we've ever seen alive. And this brand new medicine that just got FDA approval for arthritis shuts off the IL-6 protein. Can we use it off brand and try to help her? Because she's down to hours now. And I said, yeah, we've been waiting for something to turn things around, and that saved her life. If they didn't have the doses in the pharmacy, she wouldn't be alive. And they had 2 doses in the pharmacy of that medicine. So they gave it to her, and within 8 hours, they were saying, we have never seen a child this sick get better any faster. And she ended up waking up on her 7th birthday from that 14-day coma, is when she opened her eyes again and came back to us on May 2nd of 2012. And then it was 8 days later, they checked her bone marrow and she was cancer free. And that's 23
Holy
days after her
cow.
first dose of those modified T cells.
Wow.
Yeah, we went through like 22 months of standard treatment, couldn't get her cancer to go away. Then they used this new way of training her immune system. 23 days later, she was cancer free, and she remains that way 9 years later.
Wow. I didn't realize the turnaround was that quick.
Yeah. Yeah, we brought her home on June 1st. And she went back to second grade that August, back with the kids she started kindergarten with. She had missed over 90 days of kindergarten, and she only went to first grade for about 3 weeks. And during that whole period, we were able to keep up with her schooling with teachers at the hospital and then tutors at home when we were at home.
And what were you and your wife doing in terms of working during this time?
So we had some really amazing programs. I work at Penelec First Energy as a lineman for the power company. So I'm the first one that comes out when you're out of power or during any emergencies when someone wrecks into a pole. And our company had the CARE program. So they allowed any workers, and I think we have companies in the 6 or 7 states, were allowed to donate their vacation to me. And I could be at the hospital that whole time and I never missed a 40-hour paycheck. And my wife worked in research at Penn State, and they had a similar type program where anyone working at Penn State could donate like 8-hour increments of their vacation so she could stay paid and be at the hospital too. So we were very fortunate to not have to worry about losing our jobs while we were there at the hospital.
That's great. One of the things that I met your daughter at the event, and I think you said, I don't think she said it, but maybe she did, that she didn't really remember it.
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking now is it's almost like she, I mean, it's her life, so she's heard it a lot and she knows it, obviously, but it's almost as if she's a 16-year-old who's hearing a third-person story of a 5-year-old to 7-year-old that could be like a girl over there or a girl over there, and it's her. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like,
that was her coping method.
In what way?
Yeah, so when she got home from that, afterwards, she said, I remember not being able to sleep for days in the coma because it felt like something was crushing my head. And she would have really bad nightmares. So the social workers at the hospital talked to her and said, when you have these nightmares, write them down and put them in a box and they'll go away. And that worked. And, a couple of years out after her treatment, she said, I don't remember that painful stuff. And I said, you're not supposed to. We don't want you to. But she can remember the fun stuff during that time that she did. So I believe that was just her body's way of coping with such a horrific time. I mean, when she was in that coma, while the cancer was being fought with her T cells, she was so swollen, it didn't look like her. Her head was the size of a basketball. Wow. It was just, she couldn't even bend her joints. They were so swelled up. And we made it through there. And then she came back to us and got back to normal and everything. And I think that was just the way she coped with it. But I was positive from the beginning. I did something very positive in the beginning because, we were home for 6 months, June 1st to December. Now we're coming up on our Christmas at home finally. And Denise Grady wrote about her in the New York Times, and they put her picture on the cover of the New York Times the second week of December of 2012. It got overnight international media. I think a lot of it had to do with a silver lining to HIV being used to kill cancer too. But we've got interviews, requests from all over the world. And that week, we had I think Scott Pelley's news crew was in our basement. Diane Sawyer's news crew was in our basement interviewing us. And right from the beginning, I said, okay, if you want us to come somewhere and share her story, because we knew what a big deal it was. And they said, this is the 4th pillar to fighting cancer. We have surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and now we're going to have, moving forward, training the immune system. Because with this breakthrough, we feel eventually all solid tumor cancers, the immune system will be trained to beat them. But I told him, if we talk about Emily's story, she's not going to be asked about what it's like to be in that coma or anything. I'll do that talking. And then you have to do something separate that's fun for Emily. So, it got to a point where she's like, it doesn't bother me to hear you talk about it because I don't remember the pain, but I really love to travel, and traveling all over the world meant more people would get her treatment or find out about it. And we started taking those trips and doing everything we could to pay it forward and to help other families have the same outcome as us.
How did that first? Do you say it was in one of the New York papers? How did that first article happen?
Yeah, so that the hospital reached out to us, their PR department, and said, we're not allowed to talk about what happened to Emily until the doctors have peer review. And they say, yeah, this is legit. And the embargo is going to come off around December 9th, I think it was. So it'll be in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it's going to be a big deal. So we'd like to get out ahead of that. And are you guys willing to spend a day with Denise Grady and let her write, because she's an excellent medical reporter, and let the world know, about what happened here, because so many other patients are being sent home on hospice that might need it. So we agreed to do that, and Denise came and spent the day with us. And then, that weekend when it was going to be in, I believe it was in on a Monday morning. But on Sunday, she said, hey, you guys are 1A, your picture's 1A. And I didn't know what that even meant. Mm-hmm. And we had made a short film with Oscar winner Ross Kaufman to help spread awareness of Emily's treatment. And he was going to release it on the same day. So I was talking to him that Sunday and said, hey, by the way, they're putting Emily's picture on the cover of the New York Times tomorrow. And he said, your lives will change tomorrow morning if that happens. I was naive. I was like, yeah, whatever, But by 9:00 the next morning, I had a call from a lady. She said, we're the biggest morning show in Australia. We'd like to hire an NBC crew out of New York City to be in your driveway today, and you'll be live in all of Australia at 4 p.m. I thought, oh, this is bigger than we expected.
So you believe that guy? Okay, yeah, maybe it will.
Yeah.
So that,
and
like,
really, we've been traveling, sharing her story ever since then. I've gotten to have lunch with Emily in the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and we've been to Switzerland twice. We've been to Stockholm, Sweden. She met the first patient in Oslo, Norway. And just doing the media stuff puts pressure on other countries to cover it. It helped get public approval in the United States. They got, FDA approval for Emily's treatment within 5 years. And the average is 12 years for a medicine from the first patient till it gets FDA approval. But it's completely changed the world. And we're at around 5,000 patients in over 50 countries that have received the treatment. And around 2,000 of those are children, and then the rest are adults, because it's the first time a cancer treatment has ever been passed by the FDA in kids before adults. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time in history, I think, that a living drug like gene therapy got FDA approval to fight cancer.
That's fascinating. I'm thinking of the logistics, because I want to talk about Emily and how she processes all this, and you and your wife's role in that. But talk a little bit about the kind of I'm going to say added stress. Maybe it wasn't added stress, but all of the media. So for example, people who are in education right now, they used to be in education. Now they have like another job description that is, in addition to education, you're also education during COVID. Like it's a whole other job within a job. So right. You're dealing with what you're dealing with your daughter, but now there's these media, this onslaught of stuff that you have to learn the ropes of that. So
yeah, we called it another forced education.
Yeah. And did you, so talk a little bit about that. Did you hire someone to do it? Did you all do it? Did it create stresses? Was it good? Like, what was that like?
It caused a lot of stress. But we had amazing people step up and help us. I remember Ross in the beginning, he said, when you get overwhelmed and you need help, reach out, because I know how that all works and I can help educate you. And then he put us in touch with Joyce Newman from the Newman Group in New York City, who taught CEOs and congressmen how to speak to the media and how to speak to their workers. And she really, she said, I'll give you 1 hour for free. And then we clicked when we talked with her. And then she said, oh, moving forward, I'm going to help you. Because Ross said, take whatever she's willing to offer you, because you can't afford her.
Yeah. Yeah.
she became like family to us. And then we actually helped her when she was diagnosed with cancer. And then her cancer actually took her life. But, she said, I'm always going to be here whenever I can be and help train you how to do the media so you have the most impact, and that'll help more people. So, but it was pretty overwhelming in the beginning. And I knew that the more media we did, I felt like, and it actually came true, that the more people would find out about it, the more children would get treated. It was a little different from my wife, who's an introvert, who said, why do you keep accepting these media requests? So, but she realized then pretty quickly too, that if you get a call back in a few months from a parent that says, because you took that phone call, it saved my child's life, that stuff's pretty important to do.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, it was definitely another education on how that all works. And we started getting invited to Hollywood events and stuff like that. And,
I want to talk about some
that
of
was
that.
pretty cool for him.
What,
Yeah.
like kind of a, I don't know, a technical question, but I'm really curious, certainly off topic of the conversation. What's a thing or two that she taught you in speaking to the media for the most impact? Like, what's a thing or two that you took with you?
Yeah, I think in the beginning she said, okay, there's a lot of reaction to the fact that HIV was used in this. And everyone right now is doing like a positive piece about it. But when they run out of those questions, someone can get more viewers by throwing darts. And you don't have to answer those questions. Don't ever feel like you have to answer a question. You can pivot that into what message you want the audience to hear. And we actually learned that pretty quick. We had the PR department at the hospital from the beginning vetting people. And if they said, okay, this is one you should do, then we did it. And the very first time we went live on CNN from our house. So they said, just sit in front of your computer and we'll bring you on. You won't see anything on the screen, but you'll be live. And then we'll ask you questions about Emily's treatment. And the PR department vetted them for 2 days saying, listen, they did not put HIV in their daughter. The doctors never injected HIV, because the headlines that were getting the most viewers were little girl gets injected with HIV and takes away her cancer. That didn't happen. But that was our first question. After they vetted for 2 days, and Joyce had talked to us about, answer the questions you want to answer, but we sat down, we're live, and she said, so what was it like injecting your daughter with HIV to get rid of her cancer? And that whole interview was correcting, saying, that isn't what happened, but here's what they did. They took her cells off to the lab. They used HIV without the virus in it. She had zero chance of getting AIDS from this, because after those headlines started, we were getting emails of what kind of parents would give their daughter AIDS to get rid of her cancer. And I'm like, please read what really happened to her.
This was what year? 2014?
No, this was 12.
Okay,
Yeah,
12.
2012. Yeah.
What a premonition of what was to come. Like in the media now, it's like even like the clickbaitiness back then. It's terribly
that's
sad.
Exactly what made it go viral. And Ross's short film is on YouTube and Vimeo. It's called Fire with Fire, like you're fighting fire with the HIV and the cancer. But it was out for several months and only had maybe 4,000 views on YouTube. And then Upworthy.com reposted it with the headline, little girl gets injected with HIV to get rid of her cancer. And over the next 2 weeks, it had 4 million views online.
Wow.
So then we just said, okay, whatever it takes for people to watch the short film, and then we'll sit them down and educate them on exactly what happened.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
That really is what made it go all over the world, when people really started seeing the short film. And, I think to date it's been viewed over 20 million times now, but it's a 3.5-minute video that kind of explains how that's used to train your immune system to attack your cancer. And they completely stopped calling it using HIV. And now when you hear lentivirus, that's a less controversial term.
Yeah.
They don't even refer to it anymore as using HIV in the process. It's just called a lentivirus trains your system.
Yeah.
So people don't think that they're going to end up with HIV out of the treatment.
Yeah, and that Fire with Fire, I just wrote it down, but that's the YouTube video that he's talking about, Fire with Fire.
Yeah. And then we have, we've been working for several years on a feature documentary with Roth. And the hope is to get it to the film festival starting in January. So, the very first one that we're shooting for is Sundance. But that's a longer version that Ross has made, a full feature documentary about Emily's life story and Dr. Carl June and all the team that had the treatment ready for Emily, about their lives coming together at the right time. And it's going to be called Trial by Fire.
Okay.
So look out for it in 2022.
Yeah. Prior to getting to her, I want to just talk about her as a teen, right? And then her as a teen that has gone through all this stuff. This is like the fun stuff. This is like the fight stories that people ask me about. Did you meet someone? Blah, blah, blah. You've had some crazy, you mentioned the Eiffel Tower, but some crazy sit downs and interactions. Ken Burns, documentarian Ken Burns, wrote the forward to your book. But what are some of the cool, like 2 or 3 of the like holy smokes moments that you guys have had?
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, we've been really blessed. And I started to tell you, about the whisper, and then when Emily woke up from her coma and everything, the last day in the ICU, the charge nurse came in and said, "It's a big day for you. You're going back downstairs. And by the way, Dr. Stephen Grupp, who's Emily's oncologist, is on service with the bone marrow transplant patient. So he wants you in that hallway, and it's time to teach Emily to walk again because she has severe atrophy from a 14-day coma." But when we started teaching her to walk again, I had another one of these visions. I'm like, holy cow. I said to my wife, Emily's going to meet the president someday. And I'm getting her out of bed. And I said, hey, this is such a big deal with what you've created and pioneered here. I think someday you might get to meet the president. And, after a couple of days, my wife, Kari's like, please stop saying that. Well, then a couple of years later, we get invited. I'm out of my work truck on a 3 to 11 on a Wednesday night. And I got a call and said, hey, the Secret Service is looking for you. Can we give him your cell number? And I said, of course, and they called and said, there's a surprise press conference at the White House this Friday morning about precision medicine getting bipartisan support. And they're going to announce that the cures are happening now. And did you realize President Obama was talking about Emily during his State of the Union speech? And I said, no, I didn't realize that. They said, can you have her here Friday morning and not tell anybody you're coming? And I was like, does anybody say no to an offer to the White House? So I said to them, I said, you need to help a dad out here. I told my daughter she's going to meet the president someday from what she pioneered. So I don't want her to just be in a room that he walks through. I want him to acknowledge her. And they said, well, Mr. Whitehead, we can't confirm or deny that the president will even be there on Friday. And I said, I understand what you have to tell me, but pass on my request. So an hour later, I got an email from the Secret Service, and they said, if you take Emily over by the JFK painting at this specific time, we will take her into another room where we will not confirm or deny who she might meet.
I can't. I bet you're like, well, maybe I'm just naive, but if someone gets a phone call to say to come to the White House, there aren't many people who are going to say, okay, but on one condition. I think like the person that you are, your personality, it just works in this situation. Like the idea of the talking, like, yeah, we'll talk, but you've got to do something fun for her. It's almost like most of us, that's all but you, I think, maybe we like, yes. And here you are saying, yeah, but I know what you got to say, Secret Service guy, but wink, wink, just make sure it happens. That's good.
There you go. And then it was kind of the same thing. We moved forward, and we were in New York City spreading awareness at the Cancer Research Institute big gala, and Sean Parker came in there, and I really didn't know who he was at the time. I just knew he was speaking that night, and he came up to me and said, my wife and I would like to meet you. And
to enlighten people who Sean Parker are, if they don't know Sean Parker.
Yeah, so Sean Parker was the first president of Facebook, and he started Napster and Spotify. But he's in his 30s, and he's a multi-billionaire at this point. And if you saw the movie Social Network, Justin Timberlake played Sean in the movie. So he come up and just said, my name's Sean. And I said, hey, I'm Tom. and they wanted to do a picture with our family. So we did. And he said, your daughter's the face of the revolution that's going to stop people dying from cancer. And I said, I absolutely know that. And that's why we're here. And we're trying to get the word out. And he said, well, I'm going to work with people that I know, and I'm going to bring hundreds of millions of dollars to this research, because my best friend was Laura Ziskin, and she needed immunotherapy, and it wasn't ready in time for her. I said, all right, Sean, I hope you keep your word, and we shook hands, and that's all I thought about it. And I didn't hear from him for a couple years. And then one day his team reached out and said, Sean's been trying to rally all his connections, but he's just to a point where he's going to try to get this all started himself. So he's going to donate $250 million of his own money to keep the research moving forward and start the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy. And he would like to feature your Emily at his event in Beverly Hills. And would you make a short film for this? We'll send a film crew from Hollywood to make this short film in your hometown. And we're going to let the world know about this and try to bring more funding in. So I said, all right, but you have to do something separate that's fun for Emily.
Yeah.
Separate from your event, because it's completely separate. And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. That week of our event, you can just take her on vacation wherever you want. So we started that week out at the Hotel Del for a couple of days in Coronado. And then Sean told Emily, you should move up to the Montage at Laguna Beach, because it's one of the nicest places I've ever stayed. And her fun thing of the week, she wanted to go visit the the wounded sea lions and stuff. They had a rehab thing in San Diego. So we went there for an afternoon and got to visit with the animals in the ocean that are being rehabbed and then let go again. But that vacation was part of the fun thing. Yeah. It was, one of those deals at the end of the week. I said to Sean, how can I ever take my family on vacation again? But the night of his event was just really incredible. Emily got to hang out with Katy Perry and actress Allison Williams, because it was Allison's birthday. They were like having her at their table. And we were partnered with Bradley Cooper that night. And he talked about losing his father to cancer and said, I'm going to continue to make a difference for people like my father and people like Emily Whitehead. Then they played the short film, and there was hundreds of people from Hollywood, celebrities there. And then towards the end of the night, Lady Gaga called Emily up on stage and sang the song La Vie en Rose to her. And Bradley Cooper heard Lady Gaga sing to Emily, and he had not met Lady Gaga before that. So he wrote out to her house the next day and said, I heard you singing to Emily, and I think we should make a film together. And that turned into the film A Star is Born. But another really cool thing for me is that week I said, okay, before your event, I want to bring Emily in early, have her walk up on the stage. This is something Joyce taught us. Physically walk up on the stage and practice your lines. That way she doesn't trip in front of everyone in Hollywood and be scarred forever. She's already walked the path. And Sean's team was like, we can bring you up at 1 p.m. in the afternoon to do that, but the Red Hot Chili Peppers are going to be doing a sound check on stage. Are you all right being on stage with them? And I was like, yes, that is really cool. So, that's just some memorable things that have happened. And, that night I'm sitting there, and Emily come off the stage with Lady Gaga, and Katy Perry said, Emily, you're so popular, I don't feel worthy to hang out in your crew anymore. And she took a picture with Emily on her phone. And just the people we got to meet there, it was very special. And Lady Gaga invited us to the after party, so we got to sit with her and Sean Penn for a while on a back porch at Sean's house and just hang out and be normal. And I told Emily before we went there, if you act normal and act like you belong, they'll treat you that way. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And it's cool too. So, Tom and his family are from, Phillipsburg, and I grew up in Hollidaysburg, and I, wrestled growing up there. We're very, I'll say normal average, like that's just like kind of normal average communities to be able to, experience that stuff for the reason you're experiencing it, right? Not like you just won a random lottery, but this is all in the name of your daughter, who's not only here, but helping other people through this therapy, directly, indirectly. It's pretty fascinating. It
Yeah, and another thing that I was very proud of Emily that she did on her own when it all first started, and Ken Burns featured Emily in his 6-hour documentary, The Emperor of All Maladies. We got to go to the premiere in New York City. So we showed up, and Ken, who's become a good friend of mine, said, if I can ever help you in the future, just let me know. I'll be happy to help you guys. But they took Emily on the red carpet, and Kari was walking Emily down the red carpet, and Access Hollywood, I think it was, that interviewed her and said, Emily, what do you think of all this media attention that comes from you pioneering this treatment? And she looked right at him and said, I find it pretty boring. She was still pretty young then, you know what I mean? Just like, I think it's pretty boring. And then we go take the elevator up to the premiere. And so, just a lot of amazing things. And afterward, when I wanted more people to know about what actually happened with my whispers and everything, and had that conversation with Ken Burns, I said, we'd like to do a book, but we don't want to just do a book. We really want it to be good. And we feel like we'll get taken advantage of if we don't have some help. And he immediately had his team take a look at our agreement, and had his team from WME represent us, and then offered to do the introduction to the book, because he said, if I do the introduction for you, more people, it'll get to more people, and that's what we need. More people in this world need to know about what guided you. And he said, I think it'll bring a conversation together from people who don't believe and people that do, that maybe can have a conversation, that you don't have to separate the science and the faith, to create a miracle.
Yeah, and the book is Praying for Emily, the Faith, Science, and Miracles That Saved Our Daughter. I have it in front of me. To kind of start to wind down, talk a little bit about her. I met her, and she's just a nice
Normal
young girl. A nice normal young girl. You'd never know, that this is her on the cover of the book. Just talk a little bit about her personality, where she puts all this in her mind. Like, is it too much? Does she love it? Like, what's her thought when I say love it? Everything that goes along with successfully coming out on the other end of it.
Yeah, I think, at first it was kind of odd for her when she was little that so many people knew who she was when we travel. Around home, I asked, like at the school and that, don't bring it up very much, and unless you see her in the national news or something, but just let her be a normal kid. And that's all she wanted, but she kind of got used to it. We had to, at first tell people it can be very strange for a young girl, for an adult to just want to come up and hug her and say you're a miracle. So trying to give her a little bit of space, but she kind of got used to that. And she just likes the travel part of it so much that she's okay now with joining me on stage. She has no fear at all of speaking in front of large crowds and just telling people the amazing things that have happened in her life since then. So people still picture her, the little girl on the cover of the book, but she's now 16. She's 5'10". She had actually wanted to do cyber school before the pandemic started. And with her immune system the way it is, we were almost forced to do that when COVID hit. But she's really thriving in the PA charter cyber school. It's more like college. Mm-hmm. She has a perfect 4.0 grade point average. I told her, as long as you get straight A's, you can continue traveling when we get these offers to travel. And she just loves it. So we did a talk in San Diego right before COVID hit. And because she said, hey, I'm missing traveling because we hadn't traveled for a while. I said, if you join me on stage, there'll be a lot more travel. Mm-hmm. And she joined. I did a 45-minute talk, and then she joined on stage for about 10 minutes, just talking about things she wanted to talk about, and said, my parents are finally giving me a chance to come on stage, And in the next hour, we had offers to travel to Germany, Italy, France, Australia, Korea, Japan, a trip to Canada. There was, and the one to Italy was to meet the Pope. So that's all been put on hold, except we did make it to Germany once. We have another offer to go back, but we got to go to Germany and go to the Christmas markets and spread awareness there of it, and inspire some teams there that work on, that make the machines that are part of Emily's treatment. So it was just, like I said, these incredible things keep happening. And she likes to, she's kind of introverted with my wife, as far as she doesn't really enjoy going out and networking at a conference, but she absolutely likes to go on stage and share her perspective.
Yeah.
So, when we're done, then she goes orders lunch separate at the pool or something, and I'll go and do the networking.
I was gonna say they teamed up with the right guy for that.
Yeah, my wife Kari and Emily do not like networking, so that's my job.
It works out well. It's like the good cop,
Yeah,
bad
absolutely.
cop, except the networkers, non-networkers. That's cool.
Yeah.
Um,
While I was networking at the meeting at the Mesa in San Diego, she ran up like $45 in strawberry lemonades at the pole.
not free refills.
Because her fun thing for that event was not free refills. She took a friend with her, so they went and got lunch and ran me up a nice bill and said that was their fun thing to do for the day.
That's really funny. They'll take it. Well, this has been awesome, man. I'm glad that we met. I'm glad that I sat down and we were stationed next to each other. And the book is Praying for Emily. I'll mention the videos here in a little bit, but also, kind of sending out, talk about your foundation a little bit.
Yeah, we have the Emily Whitehead Foundation because with all that worldwide attention in media came calls from parents from all over the world saying, my child's being sent home on hospice. How can we, find hope like you did? And so we have the EmilyWhiteheadFoundation.org is our website. And we've been able to raise over $1 million since we got started in 2015. And we're just paying it forward. We're helping fund the research for less toxic treatment for our children. And we're advocating for these families where they can find a treatment too. And, we have a private Facebook group then for the parents whose children are going through these treatments so they can get on there and ask each other questions and have that, person who's lived it to talk to that we didn't have when Emily went through it as the very first child. So
we
tried to do
it. Facebook group?
That's a private Facebook group, a T-cell group that we add parents to. So there's no doctors, no media involved, and people can share their feelings and side effects that their kids are having and hear from other parents.
And can they find the link
we have the Emily Whitehead Foundation Facebook page that you can go on there for. And it also, on our website, we have a search engine that helps the average person with no science knowledge who might be in a cancer ward somewhere looking for hope. That search engine will help you find these open trials as well.
And it's so this is really valuable because like I said, we're living through it right now with my brother, and my mom had cancer when I was a kid. So that, and she's a nurse, so she's, understands the medical world. But I mean, just like, I don't know, a week or two ago, my wife said to me, so like, who's searching for these trials for Scott? So it's just it's a world that exists that you don't know it exists until you're forced to know that it exists. And then you need help. So stuff like this, if whoever's listening to this knows someone or is going through this, EmilyWhiteheadFoundation.org, and you can find links to this stuff we're talking about.
And a lot of these parents that are in the cancer wards or the families now are reading our book as well. And it's available on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble, but we have prayingforemily.com, a website that you can look it up. Our goal was to do a good book that also inspires people and gives them hope so they don't give up when they're in the same situation, to help them get through.
And I'll make a point of reading and covering the book on the show the week that I publish this interview. So it'll be like a 1-2 punch.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's and it's a really, like, looking at it, when you're looking at a nice car, you're like, that's a nice car. When you look at the book, you're like, that's a good book. That's a nice book. I've self-published a couple of books. And this has a look of being a very well done book. And having talked to you and your wife and your daughter, I'm sure that I'm sure that it is a good book as well, not just looks like a good book. But this has been great. I look forward to continuing to spread the word and interacting in the future with you guys. When does the movie, you said 22?
Yeah, it'll be out sometime in 22 to be determined by how well it does at the film festivals, and then what avenue, say, picks it up. It could be in theaters, it could be on Netflix.
And what's the first word of that? Not Fire with Fire, but what with fire?
Trial by Fire is
Trial
the
by
title.
Fire.
Yeah, and we'll keep everyone updated on our sites as well. And I want to thank you for having me on. I'm a big wrestling fan, and I knew about you before we met. And it was an honor for me to take Emily over and speak to the Penn State wrestlers one time before a match and Coach Sanderson let us in there. So, that was special for me. And played basketball in high school, but our whole town's all about wrestling.
Yeah.
So it was something I did with my uncle, and I just never let it go. So I always enjoy the wrestling and being a part of that too. But you're a positive influence out there, and keep doing what you're doing, because you're making a difference.
Well, I appreciate it, man, and right back to you. And I'm excited we could have made this work. And like I said, I'm looking forward to the book and the movies, and continuing to help spread the word. And best of luck and success and health to, all three of you as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Emily's past 9 years since she spent a night in the hospital, and I'm just getting over COVID myself. But I wake up every morning feeling blessed to still be her dad, and I can get through anything as long as she stays healthy.
Very cool, man. Well, thanks for being here, Tom.
All right, thanks a lot. Take care. Stay in touch.